evening and welcome to Access Iowa City, a program about independent living and the rehabilitation movements in southeastern Iowa. We're brought to you by a generous grant from the Noon Pilots Club of Johnson County and collaborations between the Extended Dream Foundation, Access to Independence, and the Center for Disabilities and Development, and also by all the hardworking folks here at Public Access Television Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham, President of the Board of Directors of Access to Independence, Vice Chair of the Johnson County Mental Health Disability Services Planning Council, and someone who's lived with a significant disability for over 41 years. We're going to have an interesting show tonight, a little different than what we normally have, with our guests talking about relationships between individuals with disabilities and without disabilities. And my whole co-host, Keith Ruff, will start us off.
Yes, welcome, Harry and Barb. How long have you known each other?
Well, it'll be 3 years, July the 19th.
And yours is kind of an interesting story, as we've talked a little before. You met in the new wave of relationships, I guess, and that you met each other online?
Yes.
And how did that kind of come about?
Well, as you know, when you're online, you develop a profile about yourself. And I had been alone for a lot of years and decided that I would really be interested in seeing if I could find a partner. So I tried it. I had been dating someone locally, and that hadn't worked out very well. And I saw Harry's profile with all of his pictures and so on, and I read his profile, and I thought he looked so interesting. So I had one of my best friends read the profile, and she said, you know, he sounds like your kind of guy. So then I had my son come over and read the profile and look at it, and I said, do you think it's okay to contact him and say, okay, we could start with an email relationship? And my son said, Mom, he looks like the guy for you. It looks like you have a lot in common. Looks like he's a good guy, and I think just go for it.
So Harry had to pass some pretty stringent testing just to get an email response.
Harry, I'm going to cut to the chase. When you were on the email communication, did you, because of your disability, did you have any apprehension at all?
No, one of the pictures that I had online was a picture of me in my wheelchair showing me with an amputated leg.
Okay.
Okay. So walk us through a little bit of once Harry got the approval from the family and friends, how the whole thing started from there.
Well, the winning thing is, if you've ever done anything online, and I hadn't had a lot of experience, but it is an odd way when you're not used to it. I mean, for a lifetime, like the youth are today and that kind of thing. And the winning thing was that Harry was so gracious and so gentlemanly. And so there was a point where a week had gone by, or 2 weeks, I can't remember, but it ends up that as you talk more, you're writing more, and it gets more complicated, and there were some things I wanted to know. But I didn't want to type all that. I didn't want him to have to type all that. So finally I said to him, is email working for you? Is that working as a way, good way? And he said, email is working fine for me. If you would prefer a phone call, this is my number. Warmly, Harry. And it just the way he was about everything was letting me not feel threatened and feeling very open, and just the way he was. He disclosed everything about his disability from the inside, but I mean, I think from the very beginning. But just wanting to know a little bit more about it, and about how he got around, how he lived his life, how independent he was, that kind of thing. Just some things to really find out how he felt about having an amputation, and things that you don't write so easily sometimes. It's just better to talk about it. So I called him immediately. Once I felt kind of safe that way, then I just called him right up. So that started many weeks of very many hours on the phone. So
We also used the webcam.
Oh, yeah, that's true,
communicated
that's
through
true.
the webcam as well.
Yeah, so we could see each other while we were talking.
So far, it sounds like you were coping with it very quickly.
You know, really, Keith, it wasn't much of an issue.
And I don't mean to make it negative. It sounded like you were willing and ready to try a relationship.
I was ready and willing,
Okay.
yeah.
What was your experience with folks with disabilities before? Had you had much exposure to, or
Not
knew
really.
somebody growing up or something
No,
like that?
well, I did work with handicapped kids when I was in high school, but as adults and in the regular world, I have one friend who's in a wheelchair, and he's had MS for 30 years. So I'm very close with his wife, so I know what issues they've dealt with all those years and what potential things were going on. I've always heard a lot about their household and how things go, and some of those things were applicable to our relationship. Not all of them and not many of them, but some things.
But you had a fairly positive experience going in. One of the things I found through the years in talking with lots of people is, while we might not have had close experiences, most people growing up either knew well or knew of somebody with a disability. And it has tended to prove fairly true that based on an individual's experience with that first person, if it's a positive experience, then they're fairly open and positive to meeting folks with disabilities or being around folks with disabilities from then on. If it's a negative experience, you know, it's kind of negative thereon, which I think we all have that kind of experience with anybody.
Sure.
You know, if you
Yeah.
have a bad experience your first trip to the dentist, then you not only don't like that dentist, you don't like the profession.
That's true.
You know, and that just, you know, and I think a lot of us, my first real experience with folks with disabilities was between my junior and senior year in high school, and I was a supervisor on a playground for kids with intellectual disabilities from 5 to 22. And that was not the job I wanted. I had applied to be a supervisor on one of the, you know, regular playgrounds where you taught kids to play softball and went swimming and did other activities. None of those positions were open. The guy who had been accepted for this position got another job like 10 days before the playground season started, and they called and asked me. And so I say, my experience was virtually nil. I said, you know, I'll try. I'm not guaranteeing I make it through the first day,
Yeah.
much less the whole summer. I fell in love with it.
Oh, okay.
And from there, I had planned on going into special education, but a variety of issues clouded that. But, you know, so I think it's just all in that experience and how we accept it.
You know, I think that I was just reflecting on what you were saying, because I was thinking, what about at my school growing up? Were there kids who were disabled? Not really, because I think growing up in the 40s and the 50s,
Yeah.
people were not out and about very much. They were sequestered.
Exactly.
And it wasn't really till maybe high school that, as I said, that I started working with kids and thought about special ed too. And my reason for doing regular ed instead of special ed was mostly about getting back and saying, I want to be out of school now. I'd been traveling. What can I get out of here fastest and get a job? And so I discontinued going on for the extra classes.
I put it this way. When I was born, we were still in the closet. Now we're coming out.
Yeah.
Intellectually and physically. And it's a very good feeling. So I can equate with what you said.
So you got beyond the computer, onto the phones, and how long then did it take you to actually meet in person, face to face?
It didn't take her very long.
Okay.
do not portray me in such a fast way.
She, we were talking on the phone one night, and she said, I'm coming down to meet you.
Because you have to tell where you were.
I was living in Birmingham, Alabama at the time, and she informed me she was on her way down to meet me. She was going to come down. And it just kind of blew me out of my chair, just about. I didn't expect that. And then, so once I got over the initial shock, she came down Labor Day weekend and spent a week with me, and we got to know each other real well.
Well, I have to defend myself because I was not in any mood to waste time. And I thought, I'm not going to be on the internet for 6 months and finally get together to meet someone only to have it be a bust. So I thought, we actually talked more hours, and I felt closer to him than almost anybody I'd ever been with before in that short amount of time. We'd really explored about everything. So I felt trusting of him. But my friends were horrified that and also his profile said he was willing to relocate. I would not have pursued it if he hadn't been willing. I was not going to Birmingham, Alabama to live. So his profile said he was willing to relocate, so that made it okay. So I just wanted to say, all right, let's go see him, and if he's okay, great. If he isn't, let's be done now.
So how this relationship began when you were not in Iowa?
Right.
Okay. And it was a long distance relationship.
At the beginning, it was
Yes.
long distance.
Yeah.
How did that feel, Harry?
Well, it was comforting. We took and communicated on the phone and on the webcam every single afternoon, and as much time as we could spend with each other.
Okay.
And then she came down for the week at Labor Day,
Yeah.
and then I came up for Thanksgiving and Christmas that year. That was 2009. And I got to meet her family and her friends, and I really enjoyed them. And she took and said, well, why don't you move up here?
Mm-hmm.
That was the next one, was like, caught me off guard.
Kind of a no-nonsense gal.
She is.
You were beginning to get the clue. Let's speed up and move this thing along.
I'm very interested. As this relationship progressed, either one of you, were there any apprehensions at all?
I didn't have any apprehensions.
I didn't either once I met Harry.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing that did happen, you know, because he said he came for Thanksgiving and Christmas, he came for 3 weeks at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Then he went home. Then he came back for 2 more weeks. So we were in my house at the time, which was built in 1926. And of course the doorways were 27 inches, and the bathroom was hard to get into, and there were steps in the back. I had to back in a long driveway. He had to crawl up the steps, and I had to drag the chair up. And we both kind of thought we couldn't live in that house. But when we decided he was going to move to Iowa, our first plan was that he was going to find a place to live. So he looked at places that were accessible, ecumenical towers, and some apartment complex that's for 55 and older out on Scott Boulevard. We looked at several places, and Autumn Park. I think there were a lot of those kind of places that said they were wheelchair accessible, that he could maybe live in, and then we could see how things went. But really, after we visited all the places and so on, we just said, this is not really very nice and not going to work for him.
Or you.
And it would be expensive to run 2 households, and that kind of thing, and try to think about him being independent in a new community and our life together. I mean, it just got to be kind of complicated. So when he went home, I started looking for houses that were accessible. So, so I sold my house, and I found a house that was built for a man in a wheelchair, and we moved. And then when he came, he just moved. When I went to get him, we drove the truck to the new house. So, and that was kind of neat, just any kind of relationship to start in a new place for both of you, instead of being in the one place that one of you, I'd lived there 30 years. I mean, it's my neighborhood and all that stuff. So it was kind of cool to be trying something new in all ways for both of us.
Mm-hmm. That was the house where we had the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That has wide doorways and no steps and yeah.
When you were looking at the assisted living and up 55 and over areas, did the folks who ran them make you feel like it was really going to be a place of your own, or did you get the feeling that they were going to want to try to control different of your activities, or?
No, I don't think I ever got that feeling. No, I lived in an apartment down in Birmingham, and so I was used to being independent and on my own, and I don't remember feeling that way.
One other thing that factored in, and that was that Harry stopped driving when he moved to Iowa. He had been driving in Alabama and had a car there, and that was a big decision for him to decide to leave the car and just be done with the car. So we knew when he came here there had to be a good seats bus or a city bus, or that I work 2 jobs. I can't be driving him everywhere. So we knew that we had to kind of think that through too, that there had to be a system for him to be able to get where he needs to go and to feel comfortable doing it.
It sounds like you both did a lot of research before the initial move.
Barbara researches thoroughly. She moved in the house in March, and then she came down. She flew down, and she drove a U-Haul truck back, which was quite an experience.
Aren't they always?
We had that conversation. He still talks about my driving, whether it was in that truck or not.
What made you most apprehensive about a move from Alabama to Iowa?
I don't think I was apprehensive. I wanted to get closer to my children. They live in Wisconsin. I had gone to school in Wisconsin. So it was kind of a welcome home for me to come back to the Midwest. I had it with the South.
And were you nervous about me?
No.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that you didn't have some qualms, not necessarily about coming up with Barb, but the relocating from a different state at this point to Iowa, and just the weather adjustment.
I had done quite a bit of uprooting during the years, going from Wisconsin, well, from Connecticut originally, where I was born and raised, to Wisconsin to go to school, and then I moved to Illinois, and then I moved to Michigan, and then I moved to Louisiana, and then I moved over to Alabama.
Okay.
So I was used to relocating.
And that, I think, probably makes a significant difference in it.
Mm-hmm.
You were a wanderer and a gypsy, and Barb was very grounded in Iowa City.
I'm very interested. Can you compare the attitude towards disability down south compared to up here?
That's an interesting question, Keith. more places are accessible here. I know we find that hard to believe living here sometimes, but it's a lot more difficult to get around down south in a wheelchair than is up here. Sure, there's some places I still can't go, but overall, it's a lot more accessible, and the attitudes are more receptive to people with disabilities here.
You know, I think not to say anything too nasty about the South, but they haven't exactly been
Progressive?
progressive. They have come kind of kicking and screaming into each century and tend to want to stay way back where it was the good old boys.
And I think there's a lack of funding also.
Well, a lot of it certainly is that those are not the wealthy of states,
Yeah.
but I was reading a couple days ago about long-term services and supports for folks with disabilities and aging, and the lowest state in the country is Mississippi, who spends like $14 and some odd cents per thousand or whatever on long-term support and services, which is the lowest in the United States. But so Harry's made it to Iowa City. You've got a new home. You move in, and what different adjustments, things need to be made now that you've both committed to this. You've got a home together. Now it's time to actually get on with living and discover all the little things that he does to irritate you and you do to irritate him, and things related to the disability that suddenly pop up that
You hadn't thought about.
you hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
It was every day to Harry, so
Yeah.
when Harry goes to reach for his coffee cup on the counter, and it's in the top shelf of the cupboard, and all those kind of things.
Go ahead, you're Brian at the chomp seat.
I'm not chomping at the bit about it, but I'm thinking, when you're trying to think about how things have to be in a household, the side of the bed that he's on has to be the one closest to the bathroom, or if you're, just logistically setting up a household. And of course, there are things that you make assumptions about that are wrong, and you don't think about everything, that you don't have any idea. I mean, before he even came, I'm trying to anticipate, okay, so here's one right away. I have two beautiful rugs that I adore, Persian rugs or Oriental rugs. And they were what I bought myself when my father died. And I just treasure them. They're my treasures. Well, of course, they fit in. I had them in the house. They looked gorgeous. They were just what I wanted. And Harry came and within 2 days said, we can't have the rugs. It just doesn't work with a wheelchair. And it doesn't. So the rugs, we figured out how to put one under the bed so that it doesn't interfere with his chair. And the other one is in the basement for another day or a different room or something some other time. But that was, those are like initial compromises that it just as easily could have been a partner who said, I hate that rug. It's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I don't want to be in it. I don't want to see it. That the things that you like, but in this case, not realizing that a chair would be having problems because of the way I had secured it, I thought was fine.
Yep.
But it just bubbled right up with the chair. And I think, what else? What were some other things?
Well, Barb tends to leave things all over the house.
Oh, yeah, he's got to be talking about my sloppiness. Okay.
And she'll leave clothes on door handles and stuff. And it's sometimes difficult in a wheelchair to get by without yanking it off the door.
Clothing comes to life when you're going down the hall in a wheelchair. It's like suddenly the shirt goes, oh, no, you don't. Get back here.
I would say my shoes, I tend to take off. I might try different shoes all day long and have 3 different pair out, and they probably end up in spots they shouldn't. And then, of course, he can't navigate around them, and it was annoying, I'm sure, you know. So he might pitch them under the wherever, and anyway.
I've been hiding him lately.
There you go.
Why you know the house was physically adapted when you two moved in? Were there any major things you had to fix for you and Hallie, especially?
Well, one thing was we have a little porch, a little sun porch off our living room.
Okay.
And it has the big, what do you call that, bottom of the frame of the special door. The threshold is about that tall.
Okay.
So we had to have a ramp, just a little one put in, but had somebody come over to kind of look at it and see how could that be an easier way for him to get out to the porch. Now, of course, this was 2 years ago, and he's never been on the porch.
But he can get there if he wants.
He could if he wanted to.
And he wouldn't wipe out the threshold. That's
No,
the thing with those
he
crazy
wouldn't,
thresholds.
yeah.
Ask her why I can't get out to the porch.
Yeah, because now it's a storage unit with my mother's, my mother's move. It's got all that stuff on the porch, so I'm not out there either except to gather my things. But anyway, we did, you know, that's something we thought through about how that had to happen. Harry wanted to garden. When he came to Iowa, he wanted to have his own garden, and the Habitat people built him a raised bed.
Yeah.
And so he could have a small garden at our house. I would still say we've got some issues with the hoses, and for him to, he does it, but it's not easy to get to the hoses and get everything watered and do what he wants to do that way. But he gets pretty much done. So probably there's still some things we could do. And I would say in his bathroom, it'd be great if he had one of those sinks that he could go right up under the sink, you know, instead of cupboards being under there. That would be a nice addition, but we haven't done that. And so same in the kitchen. If I were redoing a kitchen, I would get one of those cool sinks that was low enough so he could do the dishes. That would be great.
Just gotta pull the cupboards out.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Okay. So learning how to get around, and I know you guys have a lot of mutual things you like to do. What was the process of kind of getting to know Iowa City and getting to know the different groups you wanted to be into? And I guess actually, we'll hold that for our next one. We've just about run out of time for tonight's show. It's been lots of fun having you, and we look forward to spending more time in our next segment. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you for having us.
Good night out there.